Sometimes you don't purchase from vendors for a while, and it can be easier for processing to hide low-activity vendors from screens and reports. To change an active status for a vendor, edit the record, and on the Vendor tab, an active flag is available. When a vendor is marked as inactive and the status saved, this has effects on how the record is displayed. Vendor filters can identify inactive vendors and even apply a special color to the grid. Transaction reports have an option to print only active vendors to the right of the range. When the vendor list is sorted by the vendor number, you can double-click on the grid title to open the column editor and select an option to display active records only, suppressing inactive records from the list. When using the Find feature to search for vendors, a similar but independent setting on the Vendor Finder grid can be enabled using the column editor to hide inactive vendors from display in all places where vendors could be found, including batch entry. On any transaction batch entry screen, if you either select an inactive record from the Finder or type the vendor number in, a warning will appear to indicate the inactive status. You have the opportunity to reset the vendor status to active. If you choose No, the inactive status will display on the screen, and though you can continue and save the entry in the batch, you'll be unable to post the transaction. If you need to update the active status for many or all vendors, this can be done using the Import Vendor process and selecting the Active field. Or you may want Adagio Payables to analyze your entire vendor list for you, and this can be done from the Maintenance menu and mark vendors inactive. From here, select a last activity date to search for, and select vendors with no activity after this date, within other selection criteria. You may also limit this search to vendors without either current or historical transactions. Click the Preview button to load this list of potential vendors to make inactive. From this list, you may view the vendor information to help decide if they really should be made inactive. To tag a vendor record, highlight it on the grid, and either click the Mark Line button or press the spacebar to select for a status change. You could also click the Mark All button to select all vendors. And you can also unmark vendors from selection using respective buttons or the spacebar. When one or more vendors are marked, you can print a listing of the selected vendors to make inactive. And when you are ready to proceed, click the Process button to set the marked vendors with the inactive status. A similar process is available to remove vendors from the company data, from the Maintenance menu, and delete inactive vendors. A vendor list can be generated based on last activity, and also include vendors already set as inactive, and exclude vendors that have history but otherwise meets the criteria. Steps for marking and processing vendors for deletion are the same as for inactive. One important note is that even if a vendor is generated to this list, perhaps because they are not active, you will be prevented from marking for deletion if the vendor has any current transactions. And if the company profile is defined to not allow deleting vendors with history, then that setting is respected from this process as well, and you must exclude vendors with history. Keep a focus on vendors you do regular business with by marking other vendors as inactive. Find out more about Adagio from the product page on our website. Watch another training video on this Adagio program from the playlist, or subscribe to the Adagio YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.